Christine, can you hear me? Christine, good morning. Well, it seems like there's
Good morning, Alvis.
Oh, now I can hear you as well. Christine, now, can you first explain to us, in layman's terms, what is fronting?
Well, fronting is where a business asks black business people to join them in a venture, and often they enter into an agreement, but when the benefits are not shared with the black partners, or the black partners are not participating in taking important management decisions. In other words, they are misrepresented as being partners when in actual fact they are not. And the Act, the Amendment Act has a very comprehensive definition of fronting, and the penalties are quite significant.
What sort of penalties are we talking about?
Well, if it's an individual, they can be fined or they can be imprisoned for 10 years, for maximum 10 years. If it's a company, 10% of its annual turnover. But the important thing to understand about the new statutory definition of fronting is that even procurement officials within state-owned enterprises could be held liable if they either know that there is a fronting exercise going on, and they don't do anything, or they should have known if they were diligent in looking at it. And that's quite significant because so much of fronting happens in the case of business with state-owned enterprises. So what it means, both state-owned enterprises and private companies will have to look in detail at these amendments and familiarize themselves, because they could be liable. And so their whole procurement policy will have to change.
How rife is the problem in the country?
Very widespread. Pholosang, our company, represents black shareholders who have been defrauded, and we constantly get approached. And it's both large companies and smaller companies who engage in this. And it's quite devastating, both to the economy and to the individual shareholders that are being defrauded, but it is extremely widespread.
Now, some would say that 10% of your annual turnover is nothing if you bring in 100 million rand of profit and pay 10% as a penalty. Is that the only measures that could be utilized legally to curb this problem?
Well, no, it's not, because and we have several cases that you can go to court. The wronged shareholder, the black shareholder, can go to court. And sue for damages. So this is just, this is really, in a sense, the criminal offense, because remember, fronting is actually common law fraud. It's just that the state has now made it a statutory offense. But also, you could be banned from doing business with the state for 10 years, which is why I am saying that companies, all companies, both private and public companies, really need to familiarize themselves and redraft their tender procedures to try and prevent a situation, one, of fronting, two, and protect themselves from liability.
Now, the frontee, if they're not, are they sometimes aware of this practice, that they are being utilized by the company or not? And if they do know, what do they do then to stop this from happening?
Well, you have a minority of instances where, in fact, the black shareholder is aware that he or she is being used as a frontie, and they accept that. But in the majority of cases, certainly that we've come across, and people who have come to Pholosang, they actually go into this business arrangement expecting benefits, the normal business benefits, and they don't get it, and they get defrauded. And the difficulty is that often they do not have money to pursue a claim or try and get rectification. And that's where the major companies actually literally get away with murder, because the black shareholder doesn't have the resources that they have to pursue that. So mostly black shareholders actually do not participate knowingly in a fronting exercise.
Now, since BEE is a government initiative, what is government doing to curb the fronting problem?
Well, I think the Ministry of Trade and Industry has done well. This Amendment Act is actually their effort to try and fix these problems. Because remember, the Amendment Act also includes setting up of a Black Economic Empowerment Commission, and that commission will do a range of things, including hear cases where there has been a contravention of the Act. And I think that's a significant development because it will hopefully introduce a cost-effective method of relief for Black shareholders. And also the new Act also regulates verification agencies, because a lot of the fraud happens there where verification agencies give fraudulent verification certificates. So I think the government is trying, but I think the private sector should also try and prevent the frustration of the goals, because essentially what Black economic empowerment is an effort to de-racialize the economy.
Now, according to your knowledge, how many fronting cases have been successfully brought before the courts?
To be honest with you, I don't think many. And if they are, they don't get publicity because the media isn't as interested in fraud by the private sector as they are. And I think particularly private media, they're not as interested in fraud by the private sector as they are in government fraud. But it's not many cases go to court precisely for the reason I have just mentioned, that the Black shareholders do not have the resources. Litigation is extremely expensive and it can last for 10 years. And if you have the right resources, even when they do have a strong case, on technicalities, effectively the big business partner can keep them in court for a long time. We are going to court on a few matters now, but it's extremely difficult. And you know, I think government has tried to deal with this by setting up the commission, because the commission can hear cases where there's been fronting.
Christine, thank you so much for your time.